Hmm. Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so think about this. You walk into a big museum, right? A place packed with history.
You probably think you're just there to, I don't know, look at stuff, absorb some facts. But what if that's space? What if it's doing way more? What if the actual building, the way the rooms flow, even how the light hits an artifact, what if all that is actively uh, sort of engineering your memory and maybe even shaping who we are collectively? That's the tension, really, that we want to explore today. Our mission here is to unpack a really powerful exploration of this whole idea. We're drawing from excerpts of museum culture. Memory, Meaning, and the Modern Mind. It's by Dr. Priyanka Joshi. And this deep dive, well, it's kind of a shortcut for you, to grasp the profound influence these places have, often in ways you don't even notice.
And that context is just so crucial. I mean, the core idea, which the book lays out right away, is that museum design, it's not just about making things look good. It is absolutely not neutral. That's the key. We're going to look at how basically every physical choice, the layout, the text on the labels, everything, how it's actually a critical piece in, well, defining our collective memory
Mhm.
and in validating some group identities while maybe sidelining others and influencing public understanding on a huge scale, really.
Okay, then let's unpack that because I get that a curator picks what goes on display, right? That controls the story. But you're saying the physical design choices themselves, like, I don't know, how high a wall is or using an old Greek font versus some modern clean one, that translates into something as big and abstract as societal identity.
Yeah.
Like, where's the line there, according to Joshi? Is a modern font really a political statement or just, good design? Seems like a bit of a leap.
It does seem like a leap, but Dr. Joshi's analysis suggests that line is much blurrier than we might think. She really focuses hard on this active link between control and how we perceive things. It's about controlling perspective, often subconsciously. Think of it like this: say there's a label talking about a really difficult bit of history. If it's mounted way too high, or the font is tiny and faded, or it's stuck in a dark corner, that subtly tells you, doesn't it, that this information is kind of secondary, maybe disposable.
Huh. So the actual physical effort it takes to read it signals how important the museum thinks it is.
Exactly. That physical choice, it reinforces the institution's own priorities, or lack of priority for that specific story. The book argues the objects themselves are just, well, the raw material. The design choices are key to the stories museums tell, yes, but also, and this is critical, they're central to the silences, what they don't easily let you see. And even the futures, they sort of quietly point towards. I mean, if you're shaping history for people by controlling how they move and what they focus on, you're shaping their future too, in a way.
Wow, okay. That completely flips how I usually think about museums.
Hmm.
So we need to look at the practical ways this influence actually happens, the channels. If the structure dictates the story, like you said, we've got to start with how the museum physically sets up the experience.
Right. And that brings us straight to the first major channel, exhibit design. It's the main engine for the storytelling and the educational part.
The book's reflections on exhibit design, they go way beyond just picking cool artifacts. They dig into the physical architecture, the planned flow for visitors, how spaces relate to each other, the use of light, sound. All these physical things are tied directly to the narrative the museum pushes.
So it's not just guiding me, it's almost forcing a certain read on history through the building itself.
Precisely. Yeah, think about the paths you take. If a design forces you down a strictly linear path, chronological,
Yeah.
A to B to C, you're basically being pushed to see history as this single, inevitable story, one straight line, one truth. We've all felt that, right?
Yeah.
Like you're being herded.
Yeah. But what if the design uses, say, separate pods or big open spaces, multiple ways to enter an area? That layout encourages different viewpoints, maybe even conflicting ones, to exist at the same time. The physical space itself becomes the narrative engine. It determines if the public gets a single solid past or has to grapple with one that's, debated, contested.
That's a really powerful point. The architecture shapes the very nature of the truth being offered. But history isn't always tidy, is it? It's often messy, painful. Which brings us to the second thing, maybe the harder part of Dr. Joshi's work. It's not just how the story gets told through design, but whose story gets included, and the difficult but necessary talks around that.
Mm-hmm. And this is where the museum's role really shifts, from just showing stuff to being an active player in society. This second channel. It's about actively jumping into honest conversations about some really sensitive things. The book dives into three massive connected ideas here: representation, ownership, and decolonization. Big topics.
Okay, representation, ownership, decolonization, they sound more ethical, maybe political. Why are they so central to a book about design? How do they connect back to physical spaces and identity?
Because the design fundamentally determines if the institution is actually willing to tell the whole story or just the parts that feel comfortable. These ideas directly link to how different identities get validated or totally ignored in the public story. Think about it. If a minority culture only sees its heritage shown through artifacts taken during colonial times, that's an ownership issue right there. And that kind of display, built into the permanent structure, it sort of invalidates that community's own sense of self, doesn't it?
Right, so if a museum just avoids talking about how it gets certain objects or brushes over contested histories, the silence isn't accidental, it's an active design choice, one that keeps people excluded.
It absolutely is. The decision whether to return objects or even just to acknowledge contested histories clearly, like right there in the physical space with prominent labels or displays. That decision fundamentally frames or reframes history for us now and for future generations. The design, the physical space, it has to be strong enough, flexible enough to hold that complexity, that pain. If the architecture or the labels just smooth it all over, well, the museum is actively choosing to be complicit, really, instead of truthful. Silence in a space that's meant to tell stories is just as structural, just as powerful as a wall holding up the roof.
That really hits home, the sheer responsibility these places have.
Hmm.
But this analysis, it isn't just looking back, is it? The book feels very much written for now, for today's readers, aiming to shape tomorrow's museums. And that seems to be the third key area the source highlights.
Exactly right. The third channel is all about reimagining what museums could be going forward. The book's goal is stated very clearly: reimagining museums for a new generation. That tells you the analysis isn't just documenting past mistakes. It's meant as a kind of blueprint, or at least a provocation, for how these institutions should act in the future.
Okay, but reimagining, and does that just mean, adding more touch screens, better VR exhibits? Is it about tech?
It goes so much deeper than just the surface tech, though that can play a role, sure. Dr. Joshi really scrutinizes the foundational stuff, how museums think. That's the phrase used. The critique moves way beyond just the casual visitor's experience, the tourist lens. It demands a fundamental shift in how these institutions operate, their core methods. By looking closely at current design choices and these deep institutional habits, the decisions made way before you or I even walk in the door. The book basically confirms that these choices are critical in deciding whether museums stay relevant, whether they act responsibly in shaping public understanding, or whether they just become, dusty relics of a past that only tells one side of the story. They need to change their core identity, it argues, to stay meaningful.
That's a really thorough look at the hidden power these seemingly quiet spaces hold.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Joshi's work, what we've learned is that design is, well, maybe it is destiny in these places. Museum structures shape things in at least three big ways, right?
Controlling the story through design and education. 2, tackling the tough stuff, representation, ownership.
Actively figuring out their future role through some serious self-examination.
Yeah. The big takeaway is that every single choice, whether it's the wood for display case or where they put a map on the wall, it's a decision with cultural, maybe even political weight. Nothing's neutral.
So if that's true, what does this knowledge mean for us? For you, the listener? What's our responsibility when we walk into a museum now?
Well, what's really fascinating, I think, is how this shifts the museum from just being a sort of passive box of old things to being an active participant in shaping our collective memory. And that raises a crucial question for you, doesn't it? The next time you're in one of these institutions, don't just ask, okay, what are they showing me?
What have they chosen not to show me?
Yeah.
Or what have they made difficult to see?
And how does the design of this very room, the lighting, the sounds, the flow, how does that help them keep certain things quiet? Understanding the power of that frame, it means you can't really be just a passive visitor anymore. You almost become, well, an active detective of history.